one of the most extreme territories humanity has ever dared to inhabit. A place so merciless that in winter the cold can shatter your bones if you do not move quickly. But even more astonishingly, this white hell is not empty. Here in the frozen vastness, men, women and children coexist with ice, wolves, and the echoes of a past that still screams from the rusted remains of the Gulags. Siberia is not just snow, it is a raw mystery, an eternal punishment and a test of will. Its history is marked by pain and endurance, by forced exiles, by the labor camps where millions of souls were condemned to oblivion. Yet, paradoxically, it is also a land of wild beauty and of cultures that have learned to love the untamable. Thermometers here do not simply drop, they plummet. In places like Oymyakon, the coldest inhabited settlement on Earth, temperatures reach -70 degrees Celsius. There is no elegant clothing, no perfumes, nothing that is not strictly practical. You live to survive, and everything else is a Western luxury. In these lands, sensuality is redefined. It is not a glance or a body, but the warmth of a stove, the heated skin of someone sharing with you a night that can last 20 hours. The landscape is brutal. Infinite tundras, impenetrable mountains, forests hiding Soviet secrets, and villages so remote they seem detached from time. And amid this white immensity, the ghosts of the Gulags remain like open scars. These were concentration camps created under Stalin's regime, where dissidents, intellectuals, peasants, and even the innocent ended up confined on mere suspicions. They worked until they died, building railroads, cutting trees, digging tunnels, all while the cold devoured their flesh slowly. But Siberia is not solely the memory of suffering. It is also one of the most culturally diverse regions in Russia. More than 40 ethnic groups live in these lands. Buryats, Yakuts, Evenks, Tuvans, each with their own languages, ancestral religions, shamans, rituals, and a sense of community that astonishes. In the villages, love is not expressed with flowers or songs. Here, love is measured in acts of survival, chopping wood for her, lighting the stove for him, walking miles to fetch water that is not frozen. Romance is rudimentary but fiercely sincere. Speaking of relationships, social codes in Siberia are different. In rural areas where life is so harsh, romantic unions tend to be practical rather than passionate. Nonetheless, among young people, especially in the cities, a desire has emerged to break from tradition. They seek to love by choice, not by necessity. Sometimes that yearning leads them to idealize outsiders. Indeed, on more than one occasion, warmth comes from the outside. Some travelers, drawn by the rarity and isolation of these lands, discover unexpected connections with women who see in them a chance to escape both physical and emotional cold. But isolation here is not only geographical, Siberia is also psychological isolation. Many young people, even professionals, grow up feeling that their only future lies in fleeing. Yet the conditions for leaving are complex. Russian bureaucracy, travel costs, and fear of the unknown keep them trapped. Thus arises a kind of melancholy mixed with resilience. Those who stay, despite their frustration, end up developing an intimate relationship with their land. They hate it, they suffer it, but they also respect it. Because in Siberia, if you do not make peace with the climate, solitude, and your own demons, you simply will not survive. The most isolated villages lack supermarkets, hospitals, or cinemas. But they have something more powerful: tradition. Grandmothers teach how to prepare stroganina, a dish of thinly sliced frozen raw fish seasoned with salt and pepper. Elders hunt and tell stories in languages that do not appear on Google Translate. Among the most intense rituals are those marking the change of seasons, when offerings are made to the forest spirits to protect the family from the coming winter. In some areas, ancient customs of arranged marriage are still practiced, though with less rigidity than before. Commitments are sealed with vodka, livestock, and on occasion a simple handshake. Spirituality here is not found in lavish churches. It resides in caves, in centuries-old trees, in the drums of the shaman who summons ancestors beneath skies so full of stars they seem unreal. Shamanism is not folklore, it is medicine, it is guidance, it is law. And for women, the shaman's role can even mean protection against violent husbands or imposed family decisions. In many villages, it is the women who decide when to consult the shaman and how to interpret his messages. Siberia also harbors dark mythologies. People speak of lights floating above marshes, voices whispering in the snow, figures moving at the edge of the forest when no one else should be there. The cold, some say, does not only freeze flesh, it also opens portals that elsewhere in the world have long since closed. There are zones where not even locals dare walk at night, not out of fear of animals, but out of respect for the invisible. And amid all this harshness, there is beauty. Not glossy magazine beauty, but real beauty. Wind-scarred faces, strong hands, serene gazes. Siberian women in particular are famed for their intensity and resilience. Their beauty is not merely physical, but an attitude. From a young age, they learn to handle weapons, to cut ice, to read the sky. Yet they are still capable of dancing, laughing, and falling in love. In Siberia, even love must be brave. What maps and documentaries might omit is that living here is an act of faith. Faith that the sun will return, that food will suffice, that winter will not be as cruel this time. Life is not guaranteed. Every day is a silent victory. Who survives in such a place? Those who know that strength lies not in muscle but in the mind. Those who, even among the rusted remnants of an abandoned gulag, can see a promise that it never happens again. Siberia is brutal, yes, but it is also profoundly human. Because when the cold covers everything, the warmth of a glance, a hot cup of tea, or shared silence become the most intimate and transcendent acts of love. Snow does not cease to fall, silent but relentless, like a white curtain that seems to erase every trace of life. In Siberia, routine is woven by cold, silence, and a resilience that seems to rise from the bones. Here, winter is not a season. It is an entity that dictates how one lives, loves, and survives. The heart of this region beats beneath layers of ice and years of enforced isolation, marked by scars of history and mythology that few outsiders dare decipher. Among the villages dotting this vast territory, one emerges where time appears suspended. There, a woman whose face is hardened by the climate vigorously scrubs a reindeer's hide while her daughter gathers water from a river partially unfrozen by fire. This scene is not extraordinary. It is merely a fragment of daily life in an environment where every action demands titanic effort. Siberia spares no one, yet even in its most extreme starkness, it offers a kind of primitive purity that captures the soul. The Siberians, accustomed to conditions that would kill any unprepared tourist within hours, have developed a special bond with ice. They have not only learned to live with it, but have found ways to benefit from it. Traditional indigenous homes are lined with animal skins and built to retain body heat. Meals, made of frozen raw fish or fermented meat, are not exotic delicacies but nutritional necessities imposed by extreme temperatures. In winter, which here can last up to 9 months, the notion of warmth becomes a mental luxury. This is why in Siberia one learns to warm the soul within a fire, not heating. But cold is not the only master here. History imposes another burden. Across the region lie fields where the wind whistles through trees that witnessed indescribable horrors. These are the remnants of the Gulags, forced labor camps where millions were sent during the Soviet era. No one speaks openly of them, but everyone knows they exist. The oldest lower their voices when recalling missing relatives or neighbors who never returned. Some villages were literally built by prisoners, their bones mixed into the foundations. Yet life continues above those invisible ruins, as if silence were the only way to honor the screams that once filled the frozen air. In cities like Norilsk, mining not only sustains the economy, but carries a legacy of human and environmental exploitation. Founded by Gulag prisoners, Norilsk remains one of the most polluted cities on Earth, yet also one of the most resilient. There, women walk down ice-covered streets in heavy coats and felt boots, braving winds that slice like blades. Bars and tea houses serve as sensory refuges, where conversations turn into intimate confessions by the dim glow of kerosene lamps. Venturing further north, one finds villages where social rules blur in the struggle for survival. In some places, women have assumed dominant roles in family decisions, not out of ideology, but out of necessity. The migration of men to urban centers or labor camps has left many communities led by matriarchs who distribute food, raise children, and ensure the hearth's warmth never fades. Some even preserve ancestral herbal medicine or shamanic traditions, becoming revered and feared figures. Love stories in Siberia also take on a different hue. Courting someone in a climate where outdoor kisses can freeze your lips requires creativity. Handwritten letters, bartering handmade crafts or sharing homemade vodka become gestures that here mean far more than flowers or romantic dinners. In Siberia, every act of affection is a challenge to the hostility of the environment. Local legends add mystery to desire. It is said that on the Taimyr Peninsula there is an ancient cave where shamans performed fertility rituals in honor of winter spirits. Childless couples would journey there seeking blessings, offering precious stones or locks of hair in return. The cave, surrounded by auroras that dance as if to an ancient melody, still attracts the most superstitious. Today, only shadows cross its frozen entrance. In contrast to this time-frozen world, there are modern cities striving to break isolation. Yakutsk, the coldest city on Earth, surprises with its vibrant cultural life. Even in midwinter, theaters remain open, shopping centers bustle, and young people don designer coats while dreaming of escaping to Moscow or St. Petersburg. Yet they all know their bond with the land is deep. Although the body yearns to flee the ice, the soul has already learned to bloom within it. In Siberia, everything coexists in layers. Beneath the snow is mud. Beneath the mud are bones. Beneath the bones are stories. And beneath it all, an unbreakable will to keep existing, even if the outside world has forgotten you. At times, it feels as though Siberians do not exist on the same timeline as the rest of the planet. Their reality is parallel, frozen not only by climate but by decades of institutional neglect, geographic isolation, and an identity forged in hardship. Yet, instead of seeing themselves as victims, many take pride in being survivors, heirs to a lineage of resilience. Schools, for instance, do not close due to cold unless temperatures fall below 40 degrees below zero. Children trudge along buried in layers up to their eyes, carrying backpacks filled with more spare clothes than books. Teachers, often older women who have spent their entire lives in the same village, teach with a blend of Soviet rigor and maternal warmth. Their personal stories intertwine bureaucratic disappointments with profound faith in education as the only passport to a less ruthless life. But Siberia is not made for dreamers. It is made for those who know how to survive silence, who find poetry in the fog and beauty in snowflakes falling on rusted rooftops. Here, days are measured not by hours but by degrees below zero, weeks by the amount of firewood still left, months by the fleeting sunbeams that penetrate the leaden skies. And yet there is something hypnotic about this forgotten corner of the planet, a dark attraction that makes some never want to leave. Perhaps because living in the coldest, harshest place on Earth also reveals the warmest aspects of humanity, the capacity to endure, to love, and to carry on even when everything around you insists you stop. In Siberia's frozen vastness, the ecosystem seems to suspend time, as if the land itself guarded secrets too dark to reveal lightly. Yet beneath the frozen surface unfolds a complex web of life and culture that has defied not only climate but also history, politics, and social transformation. In this third chapter, we will explore everyday life, ancestral traditions, and the ways Siberian communities have found light in a landscape dominated by darkness and oppression. From the remote villages of indigenous peoples to the cities born from the ashes of forced labor camps, Siberia remains a fascinating blend of contradictions. On one hand, there is cultural resilience manifest in oral traditions, art, music, and spiritual practices passed down through generations. On the other, the vestiges of a past marred by extreme suffering still influence the collective psychology of its inhabitants. One of the most profound expressions of this duality is the role of religion and spiritual beliefs. Despite Soviet attempts to eradicate all religiosity in favor of state atheism, shamanic practices, Orthodox Christianity, and other beliefs have endured beneath the surface, functioning as identity anchors for entire communities. Shamans, regarded as intermediaries between the physical and spiritual worlds, continue to play a vital role in the health and well-being of many indigenous peoples, despite the advance of modern medicine. In this context, shamanic ceremonies, often held deep in the forest or beside frozen rivers, constitute sacred moments to connect with nature spirits and seek protection for the community. Through chanting, dance, and the use of ritual objects such as drums and feathers, shamans strive to harmonize body and soul with their surroundings. These practices are not only cultural heritage but also symbolic resistance against centuries of colonization and repression. At the same time, the Russian Orthodox Church has left a profound imprint on Siberia's architecture and spiritual life. Churches with onion-shaped domes and golden icons stand in stark contrast to the desolate landscape. Yet for many Siberians, these structures represent a refuge where hope and solace can be found in difficult times. During religious festivals, communities gather to celebrate with songs and rituals that reinforce their sense of belonging and continuity. Contact with nature is another fundamental pillar for understanding life in Siberia. Beyond the cold and the snow, the region is rich in natural resources that have sustained its inhabitants for centuries. Hunting, fishing, and the gathering of medicinal plants remain essential activities, especially in rural areas. On the frozen prairies, herds of reindeer roam freely, guided by herders who know every inch of the terrain. These animals not only provide food, but also form part of the cultural and spiritual fabric of the indigenous peoples, who venerate them as symbols of life and resilience. Throughout the year, Siberian life is marked by a calendar that follows the cycles of nature rather than modern clocks. The arrival of spring, with the thawing of rivers and the awakening of flora, is celebrated with rituals that symbolize rebirth and hope. In contrast, winter, with its almost total darkness in certain regions, is confronted with a set of physical and psychological strategies ranging from stockpiling provisions to sharing stories that nourish the spirit. In the cities, the dynamics change, but the impact of the environment remains palpable. Forced urbanization during the Soviet boom created population centers that often lacked adequate infrastructure to withstand the extreme climate. Norilsk, for example, became a symbol of brutal industrialization and human exploitation, with a quality of life that leaves much to be desired. Yet even in these spaces of adversity, vibrant communities emerge seeking to preserve local culture through festivals, museums, and artistic expressions. Siberian art reflects this complexity. Paintings, sculptures, and literature explore themes of solitude, resistance, connection with nature, and historical memory. Local writers narrate stories that combine raw realism with elements of mysticism, challenging the simplified image of Siberia as merely a white frozen wasteland. For instance, the work of authors such as Valentin Rasputin has been essential in giving voice to the Siberian experience, portraying the relationship between humans and their environment as a constant conflictive dialogue. But culture does not express itself solely through traditional forms. In recent years, technology and globalization have begun to infiltrate even the most remote corners of Siberia. Internet access and the arrival of new generations eager to change the status quo are driving profound social and economic transformations. Young Siberians use social media to share their cultural identity, denounce injustices, and connect with like-minded communities around the world. This blend of the ancestral with the modern creates a unique cultural mosaic in which tradition and innovation coexist. On the other hand, environmental issues are gaining increasing relevance. Siberia, with its vast permafrost, plays a crucial role in the global climate balance. Accelerated thawing is raising concerns about the release of greenhouse gases and the disruption of entire ecosystems. For local communities, this represents an additional challenge, since climate change directly affects their traditional ways of life, from animal migration patterns to soil stability. Some Siberian activists are raising their voices to raise awareness of these risks, though they often face indifference or even repression. Amid these challenges, Siberian gastronomy also reveals much about human adaptability and creativity. Dishes like stroganina, thinly sliced raw fish served frozen, may seem strange to outsiders, but they are an essential part of the local diet. Other foods include hot soups made with reindeer or moose meat, wild berries and mushrooms foraged from the forests. Food is not only sustenance, but also a bond with the land and a means of resisting isolation. Moreover, traditional music, with its polyphonic chants and instruments such as the komus, a type of jaw harp, serves as a way to keep collective memory alive. Melodies often imitate sounds from nature, creating an oral connection with the environment. These artistic expressions play a fundamental role in ceremonies and festivals, reinforcing community ties and cultural identity. Education in Siberia faces its own challenges, but it is also a field of hope. Rural schools struggle against resource shortages and geographic distance, yet committed teachers strive to keep indigenous languages and traditions alive, which are in danger of disappearing. Bilingual programs and efforts to integrate ancestral knowledge with formal education are examples of initiatives seeking a balance between modernity and cultural legacy. Despite the hardships, solidarity among communities is tangible. In many villages, cooperation to face winter involves sharing resources, knowledge, and mutual support. Life in Siberia is a constant act of collaboration and resilience, where geographic isolation does not necessarily mean emotional loneliness. Family and community bonds are strong, and the stories told around the fire not only entertain but also transmit vital lessons for survival. Finally, one cannot speak of Siberia without mentioning the impact of internal and external migration. Many people, especially young ones, leave their homes in search of opportunities in larger cities or even abroad. This diaspora has a dual effect. On the one hand, population loss in rural areas threatens the continuity of traditions. On the other, those who migrate carry fragments of Siberian culture that can reach distant communities. In this sense, Siberian identity expands beyond its physical borders, integrating into a global dialogue. The reality of Siberia is, in essence, a reflection of humanity's capacity to adapt, reinvent itself, and keep memory alive under extreme circumstances. It is a place where cold and silence are so intense they seem to erase everything, yet life in its multiple forms always finds a way to forge ahead. As we delve deeper into the vast Siberian expanse, it becomes evident that this region is far more than a hostile territory dominated by cold and desolation. Siberia is also a crucible of human stories marked by the harshness of the environment, but also by a profound resilience that has shaped its inhabitants' identity and defined their way of life. In this chapter, we will explore the accounts of those who have lived and continue to survive in this land, from everyday city life to the existence of remote communities, and examine the enduring impact of the Gulags on collective memory. One of the most complex and at the same time fascinating aspects of Siberia is the coexistence of the modern and the ancestral, of technological advancement and deeply rooted customs that seem to resist the passage of time. In Siberian cities, for example, the presence of extractive industries and urban developments coexists with neighborhoods where conditions remain precarious and where Soviet influence is still strongly felt. The streets, often snow-covered for months, are the stage for daily life marked by the constant effort to adapt to an extreme climate and limited infrastructure. Many inhabitants say that the feeling of isolation accompanies every step. The Siberian winter, which can last up to 9 months in some areas, transforms routine into a daily struggle. The almost permanent darkness during the winter solstice affects not only the body, but also the mind, generating phenomena such as seasonal depression, which in Siberia is exacerbated by the extreme conditions. However, this adversity has also given rise to a culture of emotional and social resilience where communities support one another by sharing traditions, food, and moments of celebration to break the frozen monotony. Among these traditions, public celebrations play a vital role. Maslenitsa, a pagan festival marking the end of winter and the arrival of spring, is one of the most eagerly awaited events. During this week of festivities, large quantities of blini, Russian pancakes, are consumed as symbols of the sun, and ancestral rituals combining pagan and Christian elements are performed. These festivities not only offer a respite from the cold and darkness, but also strengthen community bonds and the connection to the land that sustains its people. Yet the darkest shadow in Siberia's history is cast by the Gulags, the forced labor camps the Soviet regime used to imprison millions of people between 1920 and 1950. Located in remote areas under inhumane conditions, these camps became synonymous with extreme suffering, exploitation, and death. The majority of prisoners were political dissidents, regime opponents, intellectuals, or people unjustly accused of crimes, condemned to exhausting labor amid relentless cold and food shortages. Although most of these camps were closed after Stalin's death, their legacy persists in Siberian and Russian collective memory. Many descendants of prisoners keep their ancestors' stories alive, while numerous Gulag sites have been turned into museums and memorials in an effort to preserve historical memory and prevent repetition of such atrocities. Nevertheless, the pain remains latent, and the history of the Gulags continues to be a sensitive topic that often sparks debate and political controversy. In parallel, the influence of this dark past has shaped Siberia's social psychology. Some experts suggest that the experience of generations subjected to repression and isolation has generated both resilience and a certain distrust of authorities and outsiders. This mixture of strength and vulnerability characterizes many communities where internal solidarity coexists with a degree of guardedness towards strangers. Outside the cities and labor camps, Siberia is home to some of the most fascinating and ancient indigenous communities in the world. Groups such as the Evenki, Yakut, Nenets, and Chukchi, among others, have developed ways of life uniquely adapted to the extreme conditions of northern and northeastern Siberia. These peoples have preserved languages, traditions, and forms of knowledge that are essential for understanding the relationship between humans and such an unforgiving natural environment. The subsistence methods of these communities revolve around hunting, fishing, gathering, and in many cases, reindeer herding. The life cycle is deeply connected to the seasons, and animal migrations dictate the rhythm of human activity. For instance, nomadic reindeer herding is an ancestral practice that not only provides food and hides, but also stands as a cultural and spiritual pillar for many tribes. These herds sometimes migrate across thousands of kilometers, demanding an intimate knowledge of the land and constant adaptation to changing conditions. This relationship with nature is not merely practical, but also steeped in spirituality. The worldview of many of these communities is based on respect and reverence for natural elements, animals, and spirits inhabiting both the visible and invisible worlds. Shamans play a central role as mediators, healers, and guardians of the balance between humans and their environment. In a world where nature can be as generous as it is destructive, these beliefs are fundamental to maintaining social cohesion and cultural identity. However, the advance of modernity poses a growing threat to these ways of life. The exploitation of natural resources, oil, gas, and minerals in Siberia has generated conflicts with indigenous peoples who often see their territories invaded and their environment degraded. Roads, pipelines, and mining operations disrupt ecosystems and hinder traditional practices. Despite some legal protections, these communities face tremendous challenges in preserving their autonomy and culture. Moreover, internal migration has altered Siberia's demographics. Many people of indigenous origin move to cities seeking better opportunities, leading to a gradual loss of ancestral knowledge and traditions. At the same time, the arrival of settlers from other regions of Russia and abroad is transforming the social and cultural landscape, creating a mixture that, although enriching, can also generate tensions and integration challenges. The education system in Siberia is striving to adapt to this reality with bilingual programs and efforts to revitalize indigenous languages. However, economic and logistical barriers complicate these processes. Education is viewed as a key tool to ensure cultural survival and to give new generations the ability to navigate the modern world without losing their roots. In recent decades, there has also been a growing environmental and cultural awareness, both within and outside Siberia. Indigenous movements, non-governmental organizations, and academics work to protect native rights, preserve biodiversity, and promote sustainable development that respects ecological balance. These initiatives aim to reconcile the need for economic progress with the conservation of a unique and irreplaceable heritage. Tourism has also begun to play an interesting role in Siberia. Although climatic conditions and remoteness limit mass influxes of visitors, there is increasing interest in experiences combining adventure, nature, and culture. Travelers attracted by the mystique of extreme cold, pristine landscapes, and deep history seek to explore everything from the Altai Mountains and glacial lakes to Soviet-era architecture and remote villages. When managed responsibly, this type of tourism can offer economic opportunities for local communities and foster cultural exchange. Finally, contemporary Siberia is a territory in constant transformation where past and present, suffering and hope, wild nature and human endeavor intertwine. The relentless cold and the legacy of the Gulags remain powerful reminders of this land's harshness, but they do not fully define the experience of those who inhabit it. Siberian culture, with its spiritual richness, traditions, and remarkable adaptability, stands as living proof that even in the most challenging corners of the planet, life finds a way and humanity preserves its dignity.